undisclosed location, central Germany. Eva sat with her shoulders slouched on a narrow wooden chair in the middle of the dark room. Black mascara mottled her face and her pin curls fell flat. Friedrich handed her a clean handkerchief. She took it and held its white folds to her lips. The plotters encircled her in their seats, speaking rapid fire. Your sister Gretel is in our custody for now, Ludwig stated authoritatively, and she is only the first. He paused. If you do it, we'll let her go. Set her up in Russia with a nice house and plenty of money. She'll find a nice Russian man to marry and have lots of babies. Eva eyed him evilly, tears running down her face. She does not want children, you, whoever you are. She sniffed loudly and dabbed at her eyes. Hans said, you know what he was capable of, just as we do. You've overheard those meetings in the Great Room. You hear the rumors about the camps in Poland, don't you? Eva pursed her lips. The prison camps are running, Fräulein, Karl said forcefully. He's already given orders to shoot prisoners, sometimes for no reason, and the deaths are reported as accidents. You know this. It's Himmler, Eva shouted, crying. That Gestapo bastard. Wolf does not give the orders. He does not. Wilhelm laughed quietly. How can it be that he calls himself the Fuhrer and Wolf? Never have I known a man to use so many names other than his own. He does not even know who he is. He is a man who is appropriating power and people with his lies, Friedrich said, and he will ruin Germany with this war. He will stain it for generations to come. Eva sobbed openly, holding the handkerchief over her mouth. Ludwig stood. He opened a gray metal door in the wall behind him and withdrew two objects. He turned to face Eva and placed two identical sky blue bowling bags down in front of her. They matched hers exactly. Eva looked up at the tall old man, eyes wide in confusion. Two of us want to kill him, he said to her. Two of us want to use a new weapon from the Americans to erase his memories and take down the rest of the government. He looked over his shoulder at Wilhelm. One is undecided. He took a deep breath and continued. We are going to let you decide, Fräulein Braun. One bag contains the memory eater. According to President Roosevelt, it is a device unlike any the world has ever seen. It attaches to a person's head like a helmet. The user presses a button and somehow it erases a pre-programmed memory. He paused. All you have to do is press the yellow button. Eva stared at Ludwig with an open mouth. Red lipstick stained her cheeks. But how can you know? The other bag contains an RDX bomb. It will be set to explode exactly 20 minutes from the time you choose. You can leave it under his bed as he sleeps and have our driver take you away to safety, if you like. Stunned, Eva looked at the two bags in terror, then back at Ludwig. You must choose one tomorrow evening at midnight and implement it immediately. He bent down to her level and narrowed his eyes. Do you understand, Fräulein Braun? Eva shuddered and grabbed her stomach with both hands as if to prevent herself from heaving. Which memory? She choked back a sob. Will he remember me? Ludwig stood erect and smoothed his German army general uniform with one hand. I do not know about you, Fräulein Braun. I only know about Germany. And without this memory, Hitler will no longer be able to destroy it and its people. You will have to take your chances. Eva threw her arms up as if to shield her face from impact and screamed, I cannot, please, don't make me. Ludwig bent back down and said directly into Eva's ear, do this or your little sister Gretel and perhaps the rest of your family will be dead by dawn. The Berghof, over Salzburg, south of Bavaria. At 10 o'clock, Eva put on her silk gown and walked to the great room in matching slippers. When she entered the room, he was already there in his own gown and slippers. He looked up at her and smiled warily under his mustache, gesturing her to join him in the plush armchairs by the fire. She went to him and sat in his chair, something she rarely did unless she was bothered, and never, ever, in front of anyone else. He placed his hand on her back and said, darling. He had never used that word for her in front of another person. Eva wanted to think he meant it when he called her that, but really, after all this time, she didn't know. Wolf, Eva said in a whisper, leaning her blonde, curled head on his shoulder. Do you love me? He paused, as he always did when she asked him that question. Now, Eva, we've talked before about marriage, and you know how I feel about it. We agreed, even before the war began, that this is best. I'm not talking about marriage. Eva raised her head. I asked if you love me. Of course, darling, of course. Then say it. He got up from his seat, shifting Eva from his lap onto the chair. He stared into the fire and placed one hand on the stone mantel above it. His face grew hard as he spoke. You aren't thinking about hurting yourself again, are you? Eva clutched her arms across her chest. She thought back to those 2 times. She'd been trying to get his attention, to be his only one. After she got it, he set her up in a house with Gretel on Wasserburg Street and gave her the beautiful suites at Berghoff. She knew there were no other women anymore. No Jelly, no Angela, no Magda. They were all in the past. She was the lady of the house and would continue to be, even after the war was over. "Wolf," Eva said in a low voice, "why do you no longer sketch? I remember your drawings and wish you would. Will you again one day, when this life is over and we have a new one?" He knelt on the floor in front of her and put his hands on her knees. Eva looked into his icy blue eyes and saw death, but still, she loved him. "I will sketch you a photo again, I promise, when this is all over and we have won." He paused and then said, more to himself than to her, "Perhaps it will even be of this house, to remember." Eva knew she would remember. She remembered everything, what it was like before the war started, and how he used to be. How he spoke of beautiful vistas of mountainsides, those not covered in army compounds and teeming with Nazi soldiers, where they would rest and be together. "Yes, Wolf, perhaps," was all she could think to say. Hitler retired to his quarters, but Eva sat by the fire until the appointed time. He would never know she left the house because her own suites were on the other side of the house. 5 minutes before midnight, she walked through the kitchen and several rooms at the rear of the house until she reached the French doors and a study at the northernmost point. The expansive deck outside had stairs to the ground below, and she would be able to get back up them carrying the bag just fine, even in the black of night. Oddly, there were no soldiers stationed in the back of the house, so she could travel through the thick forest undetected. Eva left through the doors and stepped to the ground outside. Under her feet, the earth rose steeply in a climb directly up the mountainside. She shivered in her thin gown and pulled it tightly against her. She walked uphill for what she thought must have been the allotted 10 minutes, thankfully into the cover of trees that had not yet been excavated in the construction. She already made her decision. Of course, she could not just do nothing. She loved Wolf more, but in good conscience, she couldn't let anything happen to her family. But really, she came to a decision long before the men gave her the ultimatum. All she wanted was Wolf to herself, without the big house, power, and all the Nazi soldiers constantly milling about him. Without the rest of Germany wanting a piece of him every second of every day. Fleetingly, she thought of Romeo and Juliet. At least they were together. A man's voice snapped Eva from her thoughts. "Here." Eva squinted as her eyes further adjusted to the shapes in the dark. A man stood from behind a rocky outcropping and motioned her over to him. Although fully concealed in a black mask and matching attire, she assumed it was one of the men from the circle of seats. Her attention fell upon the 2 bowling bags on the ground. "Choose," the man said. Images began flashing in Eva's mind as if on a reel. Playing with Gretel in the vast green field behind their childhood home in the hills surrounding Munich. First sighting Wolf when she worked for Hoffman. Her mother's face in death. Standing at the Nazi Party Congress on the main reviewing stand with Wolf in the magnificent fur coat he had given her. Putting the gun to her neck, then swallowing the pills. Dinners with Wolf at Osteria, Bavaria. His face in their intimate moments, which she saw more clearly now. Energy flowed through her like a shock. She said, more to herself than the dark man, "Which one contains the memory eater?" Eva stepped into Hitler's sleeping quarters and gently closed the door behind her so it didn't click. As always at this time of night, he was in deep sleep. She placed the blue bag on the ground next to the bed and stared at it for a moment. She imagined herself somewhere safe in Wolf's arms with the sun shining down on them. Eva knelt to the floor and unclasped the flap on the bag. Chest pounding, she lifted the round orb from the bag and held it fully in the moon's light. It was truly beautiful. Eva had never seen such artistry anywhere in her life, even in Germany. It was perfectly round and amazingly light. The opening was meant for a human head, and inside the helmet, in its lining, was a colorful map of the thinnest wires. They were flat and almost drawn on. On the outside was a square yellow button next to a strange blank screen. Simply press the button, they'd said, and it would be done.